Do you ever make yourself feel less than so you can feel more comfortable in your own skin? Do you ever sort of size yourself down in a group of people that you're with, or in a situation where you're talking with other people, to make yourself sound less articulate or less bright? Have you ever found that sometimes when you have improved a whole area of your life, when you worked really very hard, that the yoga class you've been to, or the positivity training that you've been a part of, or this wonderful experience of learning begins to fade away from you, begins to grow dim? You miss a class, you miss another class, you miss a lecture, you miss a morning practice that you started, and after a few months, you are pretty much back to the same place you began, maybe a little bit different, maybe a little bit better, but pretty much back to the same place you began months ago. If we look at some of the self-help books we've read and some of the self-help things we've done, or the meditation that we've started, the yoga exercises that we were faithful to, how many times have you found yourself giving up on those, or forgetting them, or slacking away, and then after a while you are sort of back to square one? One of the things we find very often in a lot of the work that we do in training is that training tends not to stick over a long period of time. Long-term results are hard to pick up. And I've discovered that one of the reasons, the biggest reason for that, is that we are very used to sabotaging our own good efforts. We're very used to having a kind of saboteur inside of us that sneaks up on us and lures us away from all of our good intentions, all of our promises to ourselves, all the ways in which we were finally getting better and doing better, and we give in to something, or we give in to someone, we give in to some kind of situation where we start doing some of the things, if not all of the things, that we said we weren't going to do, that was no longer a part of us, and we weren't going to be doing it again. I suspect that all of us fall off of this wagon where we are undermining our own success, where we're undermining the good things we do, and where we're feeling less than in terms of the person that we are, because we're not measuring up to some internal standard we have inside that is not true and probably not very realistic. I call this process a roller coaster because that's what it's like. It's a roller coaster. Did you ever get on a roller coaster and get off in the middle of the ride? No, I don't think anybody really has. If you get on this roller coaster of self-sabotage, you go to the end of the ride, and what's at the end of the ride is usually enough to get you back on the roller coaster, riding the roller coaster again, or another ride, only to get off of it, to get on again. And I have begun to describe the cycle of addictive behavior that all of us have one way or another. We don't like to admit that. We like to think that those who are addicts are far from us. But these false distinctions we put in between, say, behavior that's sort of OCD, or other habitual behavior that might be like the drastic use of heroin, for example, that these things have much more in common than we would like to think. That the food we eat is our basic reinforcer, that our eating habits are oftentimes the largest and most obvious measure of addiction in our lives. And it's addiction that pulls and wears and draws us back in to some of the same old ways, regardless of how much we've spent, how much time we have taken, and how hard we've studied to become better and to become more of what we wanted to be. So we've taken a look at that, and we've asked the very difficult question: what happens when people fall away? What happens when people fall off the wagon? What happens when they undermine their own good intentions? One last question, and that is, what happens when we round ourselves and make ourselves less than so we can belong to the bunch, belong to the group, belong to whatever is important to us, or round ourselves and make ourselves less than because we want to belong to a relationship that we don't want to threaten? That's what we take a look at in this roller coaster of self-sabotage. It usually happens in a long space over our lives, but if we crunch that space, as I've been able to do with entrepreneurs and celebrities who are rapid rise, who are very fast into fame and fortune. That longer roller coaster is crunched into a smaller shape, and I've begun to be able to see a pattern of 6 steps in self-sabotage that all of us have. And if we get on this roller coaster, if you get on the first loop, the energy in that first loop is enough to propel you with each loop that you go through, each loop we complete, and we do them all. Each one propels us on to the next and to the next, and we have completed a cycle that brings us back to that place we were trying to escape when we were trying to do all of this more positive and healthy change for ourselves and trying to make that change remain. So we've tackled this issue of self-sabotage. We've looked at square in the face and looked at this cycle, these steps that we do to do that, and we've applied it to people who are in the process of engaging in their own roller coaster of self-sabotage, and the results have been remarkable. We have seen a remarkable change in people who have taken a look at how it is they undermine themselves, undermine their own power, in fact, ways in which we are really afraid and fearful of the power that we have within us and of the enormous capacity that we have to do good for ourselves and good for others that gets undermined in the process of this roller coaster of self-sabotage. Everyone, bar none, everyone does it. We do it to a greater or we do it to a lesser degree. And when we begin to understand it in ourselves, we begin to be able to understand it in other people. We stop feeding into their self-sabotage, and they are no longer able to feed into ours. If you'd like to know more about this roller coaster of self-sabotage, I invite you to join me in a new class. It's going to begin for 8 weeks only. I'd like to reveal these 6 steps in this cycle, how they work, and how they do us in, and how we can take down this roller coaster and build a new, more positive one in its place that is lasting and gives us more satisfaction and more happiness and joy in our lives. I'd like to teach you how to apply this roller coaster to yourself. And I'd like to help you understand how it can become a lens to understanding some of the self-sabotaging behavior that exists in the people that are around us as well. The class will be 8 weeks. It's a wonderful experience, and you can read more about it in the material that is included with this video.